You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm your host, Lea.
And I'm Sophia.
And today we're talking with Kelsey.
We're watching her rock her baby right now.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners and we can dive into your birth story?
Sure. I'm Kelsey. I live on a farm in Petaluma and I work here, and I'm an herbalist, and I've been here for about 7 years. My husband is Roberto, and we just welcomed our first baby on November 19th.
Gosh, that feels like so long ago.
Yeah. 3 months.
Yeah, well, we're going to ask you questions and pretend we don't already know the answers, but where did your birth journey begin? For some people, they've always dreamed about being a mom. For others, they witnessed a birth. For some, it's the day they found out they were pregnant. Where does that journey begin for you?
Well, it's kind of like when people would ask me, like, when did you get interested in farming? I feel like when I look back, there's like so many different places where I could like drop the pin, but I was not somebody who always wanted to be a mother. I thought that I probably wouldn't have kids, and actually when my husband proposed to me, we had only been dating for like 7 months. And we hadn't had a lot of like big conversations. And when he proposed, I was like, yes, but I'm not having kids. And he was like, great, me either. And now he always says that I catfished him. But I think like a really big turning point for me was when I was in herb school. We had a class with a midwife one day, and we got on the topic of like obstetric violence, and I had this like huge emotional reaction, and I had to like leave the class. It just like moved me so much. It was something I had never really thought about before. And I called my mom that night, and I was like, what actually happened during your births? Because the story that I grew up with was just like a really dramatic story. My brother almost died, emergency C-section, and da-da-da. And when I asked her about it and she like told me all the details, it was like, oh, okay, so there was some of that involved in her story. And I became kind of obsessed with my mom's birth stories. And from there, it just kind of like snowballed into being obsessed about birth in general. And then eventually it was just like, okay, I think I need to like experience this and have my own child.
And so how did that conversation go with your husband?
There was many conversations. We probably talked about it for like a year and a half or so. Slowly starting to like get him to come around. But he luckily like did. He didn't need that much convincing. He was open to the idea. When we were engaged, and going through the whole thing, I was having some like freak outs, and sometimes I would be like, well, what if I change my mind and I decide I do want kids? Like, what then, And his answer to that was always kind of like, well, then we'll have a kid. Like, it'll be fine, So he's a pretty go with the flow kind of guy. So yeah, we talked about it for a long time, and we were really intentional about it all.
Okay, so then bring us to after conception. What did that look like? Like, how did you decide what kind of support you wanted and what kind of pregnancy you were going to have and where you're going to have your baby?
Um, well, I always knew that I would want a home birth. I was like really influenced by the Free Birth Society. I started listening to that podcast like all the time, and I joined the membership, and that's actually how I found Sophia was part of it. And I was like so surprised that there was somebody in Forestville, like in the membership.
So close.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. Like that's, if I'm, gonna have support, that's the person that I want. I knew that because you guys were like supportive of
Like-minded.
yeah. So that was easy. And I guess another important part of this like post-conception story is like right after we conceived, we went to Japan for like a delayed honeymoon. And so it was like, 2 days later or something, we like got on a plane, and I felt like we were there for 2 weeks, and I could just like feel myself like kind of like coming up. I don't know, like becoming pregnant, I guess, while I was there. And it was just this like really magical trip. And the whole time I was like wondering, like, oh my gosh, do you think I'm pregnant? Like, I'm pretty sure I am already. I can like kind of feel something, And it was really sweet and magical.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I got back, I think I emailed you guys.
Yeah. And yeah, explain kind of like what you were looking for, what kind of support you were looking for.
Well, I guess to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure in the beginning, like how much like testing and how much of all that stuff I wanted. I knew I wanted the option.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted options, and
or not to be like a requirement, or
yeah, exactly. And I wanted like, people who know about pregnancy and know about birth to kind of like talk things through with me and just help me decide and offer the knowledge. But I, throughout my pregnancy, like went back and forth a lot about whether I wanted to free birth or not.
Yeah, that was your initiation, was the Free Birth Society. And
Exactly, yeah. And it just like all sounded so dreamy, like the idea of only my husband being there sounded really
a family history of going. I remember going past 42 weeks.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that was going to happen. And I didn't want it to happen, but I was pretty sure that it was going to happen. So I like, in part of my like becoming obsessed with my mom's birth story with my brother is that I was like, okay, it's probably all going to go exactly the same way, except I'm going to have this like redemptive experience. I was very into the idea of just having like a healing experience for like all the women in my family. And I found out later too that my grandma also went to 43 weeks with her first baby. So, and my mom, she was at almost 43 weeks, and she wasn't induced, but she went into labor spontaneously. But for some reason, when she got to the hospital, they broke her water manually. And after that, it was like his heart rate stopped, and she had a C-section under general anesthesia. And yeah, so I was like, and part of the drama was that he was big and he was late. That's like why they were worried. So I was like, I'm probably going to have a big late, I'm putting that in quotes, big late baby, but like, I'm going to have him at home. That was my dream.
Well, walk us through the pregnancy and anything to note in your first trimester, second, third, that feels important to share.
Well, I feel like my pregnancy was really enjoyable for the most part. I never got super sick or anything like that. I was working on the farm the whole time, and I loved like being outside all the time with him in my belly. I chose not to do any ultrasounds. And I guess like a cool part of the story is that, around 20 weeks, when people normally get the anatomy scan, I was like really debating whether or not I wanted to do it. And
to see your baby and
and just like make sure everything was okay, insofar as like that's possible.
People are always asking like if you've had it and the sex of the baby and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I was like really debating, and then one night I had a dream that I just like looked inside my womb and I could see him there perfectly, and I saw that he was a boy, and I was like, oh, he's perfect. Okay, I don't need to do it.
Confirmed.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool.
My mom had a dream with me that there was a little window in her belly and she could open it, like a little door, and she could like hold my hand and back up.
Yeah, pregnancy dreams are wild.
Yeah. So was that dream affirming enough for you?
Yeah, totally. I did not feel the need for an ultrasound after that. I was like, he's perfect.
We put it in your chart under ultrasounds. Right. Client had dream.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
He was so active. I just remember listening because we never used the Doppler either. We just used the fetoscope, like trying to listen, and he would kick it off. And it was like, well, he's okay in there, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was super active, especially like in the evening. He would just start like, and now I can see like on the outside, I'm like, oh, that's what you were doing in there. So the hardest part of my pregnancy was people asking me my due date. I hated that question because I knew that I was gonna like go long. Like I knew I was going to, and I just kept saying like I don't want anyone to hold me to it, But I was like bad at having that boundary, and so I told people, and then I regretted it.
Yeah, we're usually like, don't tell people your dates and don't tell people you're in labor.
Yes.
Unless you're in the circle of safety.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't. I don't plan on having like more kids, but if something happens and I do, I am not telling a single soul. I'm not even gonna like rewire my brain to think that it's like later.
Season. Be like, the baby's coming in the spring.
Yeah.
The fall. Yeah. But you held strong.
Yeah.
And when people started to stress about it, easy. How was that for you?
What's that?
How was that for you? Just like
it got really stressful at the end. Even though I was like expecting it, I feel like 42 weeks, I was like, okay, I expected to get here, and then like every day past that, even though I had in my mind that it's like, it doesn't mean anything, whatever, like there's variations of normal, that conditioning is so strong of like, that it's a hard line somehow.
Because prenatal conversations, you were very nonchalant about like, oh yeah, I'm going to go past, and at this point we had planned to, that we were going to do the prenatal support, postpartum support. We'd come within a couple hours after the baby was born to do like, newborn exam and all that. And you were like, oh yeah, it's going to be, definitely after 42, probably even 43. And it just seemed like, oh, piece of cake. But it really
is a lot easier said than
when it's theoretical.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I feel like when I got to like 42 weeks and 5 days, and then I was like, oh my God, like why did I keep saying my whole pregnancy that he was gonna come late? Like I should have said he's gonna be early.
You're like, did I manifest it?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I remember saying that to Lea one day too, and she was like, get rid of that. Like let that go. Just,
Yeah. There was a piece, I don't know if you want to bring it up, about heartbeat.
Oh
It
yeah.
was just like a little thing that resolved and everything, but it was like a thing. I think it would be nice for other people to hear about it, especially like other midwives who maybe hadn't heard of it before or seen it, and it might be nice to chat about it.
Yeah, okay. So I think I was 37 weeks. And Sophia, you were listening with the fetoscope, and you were listening for like a while, maybe a little bit longer than you usually do. And when you stopped, you kind of said, well, I am hearing something I haven't heard before, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad.
And don't freak out, but of course you're gonna freak out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, I'll talk to a sonographer friend that I know. I'll talk to an OB. Like, I'll just see, kind of get a feel for what people might think this is, if anyone else has heard it before, because you were basically hearing like a skip.
Mm-hmm.
The heart was skipping a beat.
Yeah.
And you said you didn't hear it until like over a minute in, and it wasn't like happening super frequently, but it was definitely there. And you actually like let me listen to, and I could hear it too. And then you called me, like, no, you sent me a message and you said, call when you get a chance. And then I was like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. But then you sent me another message right away saying, like, I talked to a sonographer who said not to worry.
Yeah, because I remember being like, oh, I should follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little ominous.
Yeah, so I talked to you, and I guess she said, like, yeah, we hear that a lot, and vast majority of the time it's like nothing. So you can decide how you want to follow up, kind of thing. And I remember thinking like during our appointment that I was like, if there is a way for this to not be a big deal, like it's that, like that's the one. And so when you said that, it definitely like eased my mind a little, but then of course I couldn't like let go of it completely. And so it was like on my mind for a couple weeks, and then the next time I saw Lea, she tried to listen, and he was just like not having it. Like she couldn't hear the heartbeat at all. And I was on my back.
So we knew he was fine.
Yeah, he was kicking like crazy.
Yeah, it was like,
and I think
not actually concerned that something was wrong, but just a refusal to be observed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you had actually heard it for a second, but then to actually like count.
Right. Just on your back, so we turned you to your side, and then we couldn't hear. Yeah. That was what happened.
Well, yeah, like I got super like woozy on my back, and had to like sit up, and we tried on my side and then couldn't hear it. And I really took that as a sign that like he just didn't want to be observed.
And I had seen that before. I'd had babies where they
when I
had
called you
like a skip of a beat or something irregular, and it resolved all except one case, and there was nothing, it did resolve ultimately. It just resolved over a couple of years. Like there wasn't anything to do about it. It wasn't anything major.
Yeah.
So that I think was helpful to have seen that a couple times and be like,
that's why I wanted to include that here. So if any new midwife or student is listening, and the sonographer had said 9 times out of 10, we send them in, the fetal cardiologist is like laughing at us, because it's just like not a big deal. And she's like, my understanding is the ones that are a big deal is they have to have a pause for more than, and I can't remember what she said, but like a substantial pause where there isn't a heartbeat for X amount of time. And even then it's like a follow-up, like just keep an eye on the baby after they're born kind of thing. So that gave us it gave me reassurance.
Yeah, it gave me reassurance too. And then like every time after that, that you listened, we could never hear it again. It was just like normal
and I would say like what are the odds that I just happened to be listening at that time, and not even 5 minutes earlier, I might have totally missed it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I guess it did creep up again, like at the very end of the pregnancy, when I was just like, oh my gosh, when is this baby gonna come? Like, is that somehow involved in why it's like, taking so long, even though it wasn't even taking that long, but of course, like
this is all like the pros and cons of monitoring. Just any test we do, one of the cons is like these like false positives or these things that are totally normal and maybe you wouldn't have even heard it, but like then your wheels are spinning and the stress and anxiety, and it's like even with a fetoscope, not even a Doppler, but just like the more we dig, the more we're likely to find something, whether you actually need to be concerned or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like, through all that time, like I still just kept choosing like, no, I'm just like going to trust that everything is fine. And, like spoilers, it didn't go how I hoped it would. And I've like, reflected on this like quite a bit since then. And I really don't have any regrets about how I did all that stuff. Like I don't think that choosing to do extra monitoring would have like changed any outcomes. So
we'll go into that for people listening. They're like, wait, what do you mean? Like what were those last weeks like, and how far along were you, and how did it all unfold?
Okay, so yeah, when I started getting to at 42 and 5 days was like a turning point for me, when I started to feel like, okay, like should I, go get a biophysical profile done? Should I do extra monitoring, or should I just like continue to like hold steady on the path that I wanted to? And I had this fear that like if I did go into like a more medical environment, that like something bad was going to happen. I don't know. Or that it would just confuse me more, that the results would be ambiguous and I still wouldn't know exactly what was going on, because that's kind of the nature of birth. Like it's mysterious. And so I felt like the work that I chose to do was just like really internal, and just like continuing to like return to trusting that things were gonna be okay. But it was really hard. It was really hard. Yeah, I got pretty stressed at the end there. I would wake up every morning and be like, I cannot believe I haven't had a single contraction yet, and like just start crying. And thankfully Roberto was already off work at that point, and so
because he thought the baby would have been there.
Yeah.
How was your family and friends? Was there support around that? Was there any hard piece from the people checking in because they knew your due date?
Yeah, my family was like, they were pretty chill, especially, my mom. She had been there. She knew how hard it was to wait. And so she was really supportive. Roberta's family, they were worried, I would say. They were worried. And that stressed me out. I kind of told him at some point, like, you have to manage like interactions about like my pregnancy. I can't really like talk to people who are worried.
Yeah.
Right now,
I delegated that.
Yeah.
Well, take us to your birth story then.
Yeah, so I was 43 weeks and 3 days. It was a Sunday. And I woke up that morning and I felt crampy. And I was so happy. It's like, oh my God, a new feeling. Could this be it? And I took a shower. And when I got out of the shower, I noticed like a little bit of blood running down my leg. And I was like, that's probably bloody show. Like, this is great. I'm totally going to go into labor today. And I was kind of like getting more and more crampy throughout the morning. We went out to brunch, and I was like keeping an eye on the bleeding, and it seemed like very light. Like it was light pink. There wasn't a lot, it kind of seemed like a bloody show to me. So I was really excited, but my cramping, I thought it was weird. Like there was no rhythm to it. It wasn't like coming and peaking and subsiding. It was just kind of constant. And I remember thinking like, man, when I hear like other women's birth stories, and they talk about early labor, it kind of sounds like, they have a contraction and in between they feel fine and they can like do the dishes or whatever. And I didn't feel like that. I felt like I wanted to lay down. Like I didn't feel well. But I was like pushing that out of my mind because I was just like so excited to be feeling something finally. And I was just like, well, maybe this is just what early labor feels like for me, So I sent Roberto to Costco to get some supplies, thinking we were going to have a baby like really soon. And my friend Abigail, my dear friend, thank goodness, she had actually texted me that morning being like, hey, can I like come over and rub your feet or give you a massage today? Like I've been thinking about you, and I was like, of course, like I'm not going to say no. Yeah. So Roberta left and she came over, and she was like doing Reiki, and I was laying in bed, and I could tell my cramping was like getting stronger. And I was just continuing to get more excited, even though I didn't feel good. And then she finished the Reiki session and she got up to go to the bathroom. And I kind of like slowly got up, and then I felt like I was peeing myself. And I was like, that's weird. It's not stopping. So I went into the bathroom and I saw that it was just blood, bright red blood gushing out of me. And I called to Abigail and I said, I'm bleeding a lot. And she came in and she was like, yeah, it's a lot. And I had a moment of panic and kind of started to feel faint. And I remember thinking like, okay, how bad is this? Like, am I about to die? Do we have time to drive to the hospital? Do I need to call an ambulance? Like, so I told her to call 911 and she tried, but it wouldn't go through, of course. And then I was like, okay, it's probably going to be faster if we just like drive there. And like, meanwhile, I was just like continuing, like from the time it took me to get from the bathroom to my closet to like grab some clothes, I had soaked a pad. And you guys have been to my house. It's like, yeah. It's really small.
On a long walk.
Yeah. So we got in the car, and I remember like at that point I had a second to collect myself, and I wasn't feeling dizzy anymore. I think it was just like the initial panic of like seeing blood, and I could feel my baby moving, which was like really encouraging. And so I was kind of like, okay, I can do this. I can hold it together to like get to the hospital. So, and I remember like I grabbed my electrolyte drink to bring in the car with me. I was like, I'm gonna need this. Like, this is one thing. Yeah. I was like, just keep drinking. You're losing a lot of blood, so keep drinking. So we went to Petaluma Valley first, and we walked in, and I kept saying like, I'm bleeding a lot, I'm bleeding a lot, I'm bleeding a lot.
Anyone out of the area just recently closed their labor and delivery.
Yeah, but was the closest hospital. Yeah,
it was the closest ER, and it would take me like at least half an hour to get to another hospital, and it was like 3 p.m. Like, it was just gonna take a long time. So they got me into a gown, And, you know, things start getting a little blurry at that point. I remember it being really like kind of chaotic. There were a lot of people in the room. There was a doctor like yelling like, we're not delivering, we're not delivering. And there was one nurse who was like talking directly, you know, she was like nice and kind. I was grateful to have somebody like talking to me. Everyone else just kind of seemed like they were like rushing around trying to find their equipment to take my vitals and stuff. It was pretty chaotic. And Abigail was still there the whole time. She was like talking to me, being like, I'm not gonna leave, I'm right here.
And so wait, just to clarify, Roberto got back to the house?
No, he never did. So I called him when we were about to leave, and I was like, I'm bleeding a lot, we're going to the hospital, meet us there. And
oh, what a shock for him to get that phone call.
Yeah. So he got to Petaluma Valley, like, I think my memory is correct. I know I was like on the stretcher already. So they ended up calling an ambulance for me at Petaluma Valley. And I was on the stretcher and I saw him and I blew him a kiss because I wanted him to know that I was like, okay, even though I wasn't really okay, but you know.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, this sucks. That's what I said. Yeah, this sucks. And thankfully he got there right when he did, because then he could come in the ambulance with me.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I was just like laying there in the ambulance, and we were driving on the 101, and I was like looking out the window, and I was just like,
the ability to listen to the baby.
Oh yeah, at Petaluma Valley they had the Doppler.
And so you and baby all sounded fine. Did they do an ultrasound or anything, or they were just like check vitals, get you to the other hospital?
Just check vitals, get me to the hospital. Okay. Which is so funny because I got a bill from them for $5,000. I was like, they didn't do a single thing. Like, they didn't treat me at all. They just called an ambulance. Wow. But anyway, thankfully I have insurance. So yeah, they listened with the Doppler, and his heart rate sounded good as far as I could tell, you know. Great. And the whole time, I feel like I was just feeling like I wasn't really that scared. I don't know if that's like because I was just in like a trauma state or what, but I was just like mad. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is really not what I wanted. Yeah, so we got to the hospital. We were greeted by the L&D staff, and they were really wonderful. Thankfully, there was like nurses telling me like, you know, I was planning a home birth and I had to transfer, and I know how hard it is, and they were just really empathetic, and I was very grateful.
Yeah. Did anyone give you a hard time for your dates, how far along you were?
I wouldn't say anybody gave me a hard time. They definitely like noted it a lot, you know, but no, they were mostly just like, well, the important thing is that you are here now, and you know, that kind of thing. The doctor wasn't super, like, she was very down to business, you know, whatever. She was great, but she wasn't like about to lecture me or anything like that. It's just like, let's get this done.
Well, that's nice, because some women can feel really villainized, you know, for their choices. So
right, yeah, I really didn't feel that at all.
Good, great.
Yeah,
because it's like everything that's going on could be traumatic enough, and then to like add a third layer of feeling like, yeah, the bad guy could be really extra hard.
Right. So at that point, they did an ultrasound, and they could see that the placenta was abrupting on the ultrasound, which apparently is pretty unusual to be able to see it on the ultrasound. Mm-hmm. That typically means it's like pretty big. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll kind of rewind for a second, because the night before this happened, I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt kind of crampy at that point, and I knew that my placenta was like up at the top of my belly, and I felt like a weird pinching that night. And I remember thinking, like, did my placenta just detach? And then, like, shrugged it off as just like, oh, I'm just having anxious thoughts again. But, you know, I kind of knew that that's what was going on. Some part of me knew that I was having an abruption when I was bleeding. Yeah, so the doctor said, oh, and I'll also add, I felt my first contraction when they put the monitor on me when I got to the hospital. I told them it was too tight. I was like, it feels like it's too tight. And she was like, it looks like you're having a contraction. I was like, oh, that's what that feels like. And after that, they were coming like really a lot, really regularly. And they hurt.
You're like, I can confirm.
Yeah, but I was like also kind of grateful to like feel that, you know. I really wanted to know what it felt like. Yeah. So the doctor said, we can check your cervix, and if you're seeing close to delivery, we can try for a vaginal delivery, which really surprised me because I could not imagine like pushing. Like the whole time I was still like gushing blood. So I was surprised that she said that, but she checked me and I was 1 centimeter. So I was very far from delivery. And so she just said, you know, this isn't going to resolve on its own and we have to recommend C-section. And so Roberta and I took a moment to just like check in, you know, and actually at that point I called Lea and I told her what was going on. And you kind of like affirmed like, yeah, it's a really serious complication and, you know.
And this is why we have hospitals and
yeah, the rare situation that's really needed.
It's hard to contend with being that person though, you know.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
you guys were both in such a place. I mean, I know you were in shock, but like just also in a place of acceptance and like just trying to move forward with like what's the best way to do this, like talking about vaginal swabbing and skin to skin right after and just like how to make the situation
like the best family-centered cesarean as possible in the situation.
Yeah, and I will say I wasn't prepared. Like I wish I had like thought through those kind of scenarios a little bit more, like what would I actually want if I did end up in the hospital, because I was just so focused on like not giving that any attention during my pregnancy, you know. And there were definitely things that I wish that I had asked about in the hospital. Like I didn't get to see my placenta and I really would have liked to at least see it and, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, so it was pretty obvious that he needed to come out. It was time. So we went in for the surgery. As soon as they put in the epidural, his heart rate started dropping really fast. But still, I knew it was going to be okay. I knew he was going to be okay. They started, you know, picking up the pace. And it was really fast, you know, really fast surgery. They did something to him. They gave him a little bit of resuscitation when he came out. But it felt like 2 minutes at most before he was like on my chest. Roberto got to cut the cord. Yeah, and then they put him on me, and he was like rooting already, and his eyes were wide open. He was like staring straight at me, and he kept like pulling the oxygen out of my nose. And I kept like taking off his hat and kissing his head, and they kept telling me to put his hat back on, and I was like, no, I want to kiss his head. That was really sweet, to just see that, you know, he was perfect, just like in my dream.
I know, I was thinking back about your dream, like you opening your belly up.
Yeah.
Like, metaphor for ultrasound or cesarean, you know, however you want to do it, you know.
Totally. There were some like points during my pregnancy when he would be like moving so much, like at the end. And I kept thinking like, he's trying to come out of my belly. Like he's trying to come out of my belly.
And how much did he weigh? He was
9 pounds even.
Yeah.
They kept being like so big. And I was like, whatever, he's small. He's not that big. He was super strong, like looking around, holding his head up, and yeah. So thankfully he, didn't need to go to the NICU or anything like that, and we could be together right away.
And he was a boy, which you didn't know.
Yeah.
You knew in your dream, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I suspected, but I didn't know for sure.
Is there anything to note about the hospital stay or like your breastfeeding journey or immediate, like, postpartum?
Well, I feel like, for as wonderful as L&D was at the hospital, postpartum was harder. I just felt like I wasn't prepared for how many different people would be like coming in and out. To like, oh, we're just gonna take your vitals and just gonna check his vitals and just gonna do this test and that test, and like I was so overwhelmed, and I kept thinking like it was just supposed to be the three of us, it was just supposed to be the three of us. And at one point, well, first of all, I refused to sleep the first night because they wanted me to put him in the bassinet, and so I was like, no, I'd rather stay awake and hold him. And then I think at like 3 a.m. I was like, okay, Roberto can hold him for a couple hours while I can sleep for a couple hours. So that happened. So I was like, on edge, and I had just been through so much. And yeah, then the next day, at some point, they came in to do the hearing test. And, some woman that like came in, didn't introduce herself, just kind of picked him up, swaddled him, took him over and started doing the test. And I just started like bawling because I was like, who are you? Like, you just take my baby, you don't even say anything, And then at the end, she just goes, he passed, and left. It was like so intense.
Yeah. How like connected you still are with your baby right away, just like that feeling of them even being a foot away from you is so intense. I was like, this morning, my first daughter, we were in the hospital, and she was on the other side of the room, and they did a blood draw on me, and as soon as the needle went in, she started crying, and it was like she could feel it. It was wild.
It's like this primitive, like, how does this baby survive except without being like, would be just needing to be on their mom the whole time, like it would be dangerous to set your baby down
right
a day,
right.
and all that. It's like this was literally the only safe spot.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And just probably trying to hold on to like, well, at least I can make the postpartum be what I want it to be, as much as possible. And, but you got home and then could make it be.
Yeah. So after that, I was like, kind of like, had my wits about me a little bit more and realized I could say no to more stuff, or just like, if you're going to check his vitals, like he stays on me, kind of thing. And breastfeeding, it went well. Like he latched right away and he was hungry. But I do feel like I got a lot of like conflicting information at the hospital. Because again, it's just like so many different people and they all have their own ideas, and somebody new comes in and sees what we're doing and is like, no, do it like that, like that kind of thing. So I was really grateful when we got home and Lea came, and you just kind of like showed me that I could be way more relaxed when I'm like holding him. Like the way that they showed me to do it was like, holding him with this hand and then holding my breast with this hand, and like Roberto's hands were in there too, and it was just like so much and all really unnecessary. Like I could just hold him and he would latch on the boob. It's like quite simple. Um, yeah, and then at one point, or like there were a couple weeks when he was struggling with my letdown, it was like forceful, and he was kind of like choking and stuff. Um, but that has really leveled out, and yeah.
How did it feel coming out of that birth where maybe your trust in your body was a little bit like questioned or like not what you expected into breastfeeding where you just had this like abundance of milk and your body was like, we do this, we can do this, I'm working perfectly, like so much milk, I'm flooding your baby.
Yeah. When did your milk come in too? Because, without having labor and with having a C-section, there's talk about it being delayed.
No, my milk came in when I was still in the hospital. I started to feel like my breast really heavy. I left the hospital the second day, I think. I stayed 2 nights. So the third day I left the hospital, and by the time we got home, I think the milk was in.
I remember him pooping on your beautiful silk sheets.
Yeah.
That was so sweet. You were just talking about weight gain and that like new parent concern. I mean, any parent, I guess, was like, is my baby getting enough to eat? And then it was like,
Yeah.
all over the sheets.
Affirming.
It was very affirming, and it was very clearly like breast milk poop.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember you being like, okay, the milk is in. Yeah, that was hilarious. I still laugh about that sometimes.
Right.
But I was also really anxious about, I was so grateful that breastfeeding was going well. And, he passed his birth weight by day 5, I think. So that was like amazing. But I was really anxious that I was going to have like another medical emergency myself. And at one point, Roberto and I both convinced ourselves that I had Tylenol poisoning and that I was like going into liver failure. And I remember thinking like, well, then I'm just going to have to die because I'm not going back to the hospital, It was really hard. It was really hard. And I just kept saying to him, like, I don't want to be recovering anymore. I just want to be recovered. Like, this sucks. I was in a lot of pain and I wasn't used to like not being able to move around, I never had a surgery before. So yeah, postpartum was really hard the first couple weeks. It was just so raw and yeah, Lea also talked me down from that and convinced me that I did not have Tylenol poisoning. So
can we talk a little bit more about the placental abruption? Because I know you had wrote into another podcast asking about like, what the hell just happened? Is this because I went to 43? Like, is there a relationship to that? And can you, I'm sure you're like this expert now, can you speak on that? And we will even link the episode in the show notes for anyone who wants to hear it.
yeah, totally. I was like questioning everything after this happened. It really made me like question the nature of reality, like is there a greater purpose to this? Like, is meaning created or discovered? Like, is this just random? Like, why did this happen? I'm so healthy, and I've really had to confront like, the ways that I felt like a victim and of like, the universe, I guess, and like that I felt like almost like an entitlement or something, that I was like doing all this internal work to have this like beautiful birth and I didn't get it. And yeah, it's been a lot to like move through all of that, and
I'm sure to like contend with what would have happened to me, like, would I have just been one of those women and babies that didn't make it, like if we didn't have this.
Yeah, I was like exactly like preaching the whole time that like birth is safest when you just leave it alone and all of that. And it's like, oh, well, I guess in my case it wasn't actually. And I've been like not wanting to like tell the story that like he almost died or that I almost died or anything like that. Like, I don't really feel like that's true. There wasn't any point that I felt like either of us was going to die. But you're right. Like, we really needed help. and the hospital was the only place we could go to get help. So yeah, I'm very grateful that we were able to get the help that we needed.
Yeah. And when you had wrote into, it was the Dr. Stu, well, it's birthing instincts with Dr. Stu and Bliss, you had wrote in and asked about it. Was there any like takeaways from that about, you know, your situation and the abruption?
Yeah, well, I was really focused on my dates, and like you said, like feeling like there was some kind of, or wondering if there was some kind of relationship between the abruption and the dates. And Dr. Stu said that, you know, post dates is not a known risk factor. But I am a little confused about that because at some point, Sophia, you emailed me some information about post-dates pregnancy, and you had listed like placental abruption as a risk on there. So I'm curious where you heard that or learned that.
The theory behind it is that the longer you're pregnant, the more your risk increase of everything, you know, like just in general, because you have more time to be pregnant, you know, more time for things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he was saying that the people who have the highest rates of placental abruption, correct me if you remember hearing him differently, were before 37 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
This, and we talked about this prenatally, just when you were, you know, sort of feeling like you probably would go past 42 weeks, and just like processing that, is this idea that when you go past term, your placenta just suddenly stops functioning, that it gets old, that it, you know, and that's where like the non-stress testing, biophysical profile, all of that stuff, a lot of it is looking at your placenta to see if it's still functioning well. And this idea that it just like, you know, your placenta just kicks it after a certain point, you know, and that, you know, abruption really doesn't have to do with the placental, like there isn't a correlation.
Like the health of it.
Right, exactly. Like the only abruption that I've had that I feel really like, yes, this was an abruption. The placenta looked completely healthy to me. There was no, the amniotic fluid was plentiful. It looked healthy and vibrant, and there wasn't any sign that like it had detached because it was old.
Right.
So I wish that you had gotten your placenta for many, many reasons, but least of which is just to have seen it and like had that visual and been able to say like it wasn't about how long he cooked, you know?
Yeah, I do feel more confident in that now. And I requested my medical records, and even in the pathology report, it said that there was like they couldn't see the abruption even like on the placenta. I don't really know why, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Like they could see it on the ultrasound, but they couldn't see it on the placenta itself.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And also I appreciated their perspective. At one point they were quoting another midwife who was talking about like birth being like the ocean, where it's like, you know, yes, it's this like natural part of life on earth, and like the ocean is dangerous too, and it's beautiful, and we don't have to be scared to go into it. And also, you know, like, yeah, things can just happen, and
having a respect for it, you know, not necessarily of it, but like respecting it and the power that it holds. Yeah. And
healing warnings, you know, like your body with the blood obviously was like something is going on, you know, and like seeing that and respecting it.
Yeah.
But it's such a hard call to make.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you felt called to share your story, because one, all stories are deserving of being shared. And two, there's like so much information and wisdom in hearing your journey, and for other families and also for birth professionals. And
Yeah, thank you. I'm like a huge podcast junkie, and I started doing my prenatal care with you guys. I was like secretly hoping that I would get to tell my story on your podcast. And I was afraid that with the way that my birth went, that I would be disqualified. So
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'm glad you guys let me tell my story. I really appreciate it.
It's so, so important for people. And, I think whatever birth you have is like community and or pregnancy or postpartum is like everybody has their struggles, and knowing that someone else experienced it and being able to like hear that and how you processed it and got through it, and like the questioning that you did, like you said, about what your path was and all of that, I think is so important and so beautiful. So we're really grateful.
And like the whole point of it for us is that women feel educated to make their own decisions,
Yeah.
and like that's where the power lies. Is not that, because it could have gone so many different ways, you never know, but like to feel like you were held in your decision making and not coerced into something or scared out of something, I think is where like a lot of the healing can come from when things don't go according to plan.
Yeah. And you could have, chosen the medical model and been induced at 42 weeks and ended up with a cesarean and been like, was that necessary? Like if I had just waited, so it's just unpredictable.
Yeah. Or who knows, induced at 39 and had a vaginal birth, but felt like belittled the whole time and like, oh, that was such a horrible experience. And, there's just like so many different ways it can go. And yeah, but to know that like you did everything in your power to set yourself up for the birth you wanted. And there are some things that we just can't control.
Yeah, totally. That's so true. Like I feel really grateful that I'm not here questioning whether or not my C-section was necessary. I know that it was necessary, and the why of it, it may take me a long time to either accept that I will never know, or have a reason. But one more interesting detail I just want to add, I was saying that I was so obsessed with my mom's birth story throughout the whole thing, and I had my C-section one day before my brother's birthday.
Wow.
So they share a birthday. Yeah, it was really parallel.
Yeah, there's some things that's just how you were saying, this divine destiny thing or random or what is
what is actually going on here.
I know the more I processed my births, the more true something felt for me, whether it was provable or not. I was as the years went on, I'm like, this feels true in my heart, and I can't prove anything, but
Right.
yeah, so maybe that'll be true for you, or something just feels like it's the right reason why.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing with everyone, and for
rocking your baby to sleep the entire time. You've just been doing the sway. Just to warn you, I have teenagers and I still do the sway sometimes.
Yeah.
If I'm waiting in a line, I'll just find myself doing this, and I'm like, okay, they're 15 and 13. They do not need to be rocked to sleep.
Totally.
Mommy rock never goes away.
It doesn't.
Okay, well, I hope. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to the Born Wild podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe every week to get the latest one.
And please follow us on Instagram at Born Wild Podcast, as well as Facebook. You can also write to us at info@bornwildmidwifery.com, as well as our website, bornwildmidwifery.com.
And remember, stay wild.